Well, this is the final message in our Imago Dei series today. And as you leave this morning, we want to give you something. And we wanted to make sure that everybody got these who wanted them. And if you don't want them, that's fine too. We understand. But we had a little decal made. It's a little decal that has our Imago Dei symbol there. And it says Imago Dei on it. It's simply Imago Dei. And we asked Lyndon to make these up for us, and he did a great job. And this is so that we don't forget what we've learned in this series. So my challenge to you is, as you walk out this morning, and ushers will be there to hand these out to you, grab one and stick it somewhere that you're going to see it on a regular basis. That may be on your bathroom mirror. It may be somewhere in your car. It may be on your computer. Maybe on your phone case. Maybe on the back of your child's head, your husband's forehead. Somewhere where you're going to be reminded on a regular basis, Imago Dei. So that as you see it, this is supposed to act as a trigger to remind you of some of the things that we have talked about in our time together. It's also a potential conversation starter, depending on where you put it. Somebody sees that and goes, oh, that's interesting. What does that mean? Imago Dei, what is that? And you might have the opportunity right then to talk about the whole idea of, well, that's a sticker that we got after we went through this series in our church on what it means to be made in the image of God. And who knows where that might lead as far as a conversation that you could have with somebody who asks. So that's what this is for, and I'll try to remind you at the end of the service. But the whole idea, like I said, is to trigger us to think regularly about this truth, because this is not the truths that we've been going over, and the core truth of the Imago Dei that we've been going over. We can't forget it. It's too important. We've got to be reminded of it because it will help you to be reminded of how to answer some of the confusing and controversial questions that we're facing in our world today. So some of you may be sitting there going, wow, that's great, good, yeah, oh, yeah, a sticker to help us to remember the things that we've learned. I don't remember. What have we learned? And I know we've gone over a lot. We started this series on March 10th. And so we've been doing this for several weeks. Since then, Easter has taken place and a number of other things. And so I know there's a lot of things that have gone on. And so this morning, what I really want to do is I want to summarize where our series has taken us. And then I want to give you a few closing ideas about why it matters. Why does this idea of Imago Dei really matter? And then I want to conclude our time together this morning with a story. And I think you'll enjoy it. But our goal is that we kind of take all the loose ends and bring them together at this point, kind of tie them up so that we have a better idea of where we've been so that we'll know where we're going. Amen? So, there's a lot on your notes there this morning. I hope that it didn't overwhelm you too much. You go, oh my gosh, look at all those blanks. I'm going to try to move through this quicker than normal, but I won't make any promises because I might get stuck along the way. But that's my goal anyway, is to kind of move through this. Now, let me tell you how this works. Your notes could actually, for those of you that have been here for all or most of our sermons in this series, your notes could almost work like a quiz. Because those first 8 points on there, those are all review. They're all things, they're the highlights of the messages that we've gone through. So some of you play this game anyway, even on a normal message day, where you try to think, okay, let me think how Randy thinks and see if I can guess the blank before he tells me what it is. Well, this morning, it can actually kind of work as a quiz. You've already had this. And so it may be that you can even go through right now as I'm talking, go, oh, I know the answer to that one, and jot that in and move down. And if not, I'm going to give you the answers anyway, so it should all be good by the time that we finish. But this message in your notes this morning will act as a summary guide to everything that we've talked about so far in kind of a succinct package. So here we go. Where has our series taken us? Well, it's taken us all the way back, first of all, to the beginning. Remember? We looked at the most significant statement in all the universe, not just in all the Bible, not just in Christianity, but the most significant statement in the universe. And it's the very first sentence of the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Folks, that is the most significant statement in the universe of all time, because if that is true, then the implication of that is amazing. If that is true, that means this. Number one, God is, help me out, creator, very good, designer, and purpose giver. As creator, he made, but he made as a designer and with purpose. That's what that means. And so we saw, man, that is just so hugely important, because as creator, designer, and purpose giver, we can trust his directives, his boundaries, his commands, even though we sometimes don't fully understand them. Because if he is powerful enough and wise enough to create, design, and give purpose, then even when I don't understand or fully comprehend his directives, his boundaries, his commands, I can trust him. Then we said, because God is creator, designer, and purpose giver, he has the last word on every subject. We said everything that we look at, every question that comes our way with regard to how we live and how society is dictating to us how we live, we must first ask the question, what does God have to say about this? Because if he is creator, designer, and purpose giver, he has an answer for how we best function, how we best work. That makes sense. If you stop and think about it, we do that all the time, right? Something goes wrong with an appliance that we have, with a car that we drive, and we look first to the manual that we got. The manufacturer's guide, the people who made it and designed it, to see if there is something that we need to do to fix the problem of the thing that they designed. And so when we talk about God being creator, designer, and purpose giver, he gets the last word on everything, because he knows the way we were designed and how we function best. And we said this on number 2. People are uniquely made in God's image. We're uniquely made in God's image. God created people unique from all the rest of creation. Now get this, this is just, sometimes again we miss things because of the familiar. But God created everything with his word. Check it out. If you go through Genesis chapter 1 and you start down from verse 2 on, you're going to see that God spoke, he said, and it came to be until he got to man. And when he got to man, when he got to people, God created not with his word, but with his hands and his breath, his ha. It's personal. God didn't just speak people into existence. He used his hands and he formed him out of the dust of the ground. And he breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. That's God getting personal with this creation of people. Why? Because he imprinted humans with his image. The Imago Dei. That is the title of our series. The image of God. And we get that from Genesis 1, 26 and 27. Then God said, let us make human beings, here it is, in our image, to be like us. They will reign over the fish of the sea, the birds in the sky, the livestock, all the wild animals on the earth, and the small animals that scurry along the ground. So God created human beings in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them over and over again in those 2 verses. Image, image, image. God wanted to make sure that we understood that we are unique from all other creatures because we have imprinted on us his image. We are unique from everything else. And we gave this definition, it's there in your notes, for the Imago Dei, the image of God. It's the imprint of God's character on humanity that enables us to reflect His glory, represent His authority in relationship to God, each other, and nature. And we zeroed in on this idea of reflection. The key words there, reflection, represent, and relationship. But we really zeroed in on the word reflection because all of God's creation in a certain way reflects His glory, but man uniquely reflects His glory because we're made in His image. And so we zeroed in on this saying it's kind of like a mirror. We are kind of like mirrors that are to reflect the image of our God. And so I brought the mirror back, and I know some of you freaked the last time I brought this because as I walked around, you got to see yourself. But that's the whole point, because a mirror reflects what's in front of it. And as man, as people, as we are before our God, we reflect who He is. And among many ways that that's done, we zeroed in on the idea that that's mentally, that's socially, that's morally, that we reflect God, right? So we said mentally we can reason and we can make choices. Unlike the rest of the animal world. Now, there's a certain sense of reason and choices, but they're always for survival. They're always for their own good. There's no deep reason. You don't see your dog sitting in the corner contemplating life. He's contemplating his next meal, perhaps, and what he needs to do to get that from you. But there's no real reason and choices going on. And we said that this is reflected all the time, not just in people who are believers, but in every human being. When a person writes a book, when a person calculates a math problem, when a person does some engineering feat, that's all a demonstration of the Imago Dei. They're mentally given a capability that no other creature has because they've been created in the image of God. They reflect God that way. Morally, how does that work? Well, morally, we have the capacity to know right and wrong. There is within us, Romans tells us that in the heart of all of us is this sense of right and wrong. We know innately what is right and wrong. We can go through any people group, any tribe, and they have laws, they have rules. They may be a lot more primitive than ours, but they basically are saying in those rules there is a right and a wrong. And so that Imago Dei shows up in every time something morally is done by a human being. When we write a law to right a wrong, that's an Imago Dei issue. That's a reflection of this God who made us. And then we said socially, we're different. Relationally, we're different. We can have deep and meaningful relationships. You go, well, you know what? Don't animals have relationships? Yeah, they do to a certain level, but not on the deep level that we have relationship. We connect in a unique way. And that unique way is a result of us bearing the image of God. And so every time a deep relationship is demonstrated in humanity, it is a sign of the Imago Dei in the person. When two people get married and commit themselves to each other, that's a picture of Imago Dei. When you hug a child, when you make a friend, those are all symbolic and reflections of the Imago Dei that is each of us. And so we said this is a huge idea that we reflect the image of the Creator. By the way, one of the most unique ways that we reflect the image of the Creator is that we are creating people. We create others, so to speak. Others like us who bear the image of God. And so we zeroed in on this idea as we talked about the Imago Dei and the fact that we are image bearers. We are Imago Dei. It's not something we have, it's who we are. And then number 3, as we move on, we said male and female equally bear Imago Dei. We've seen that in God's wisdom and creativity, He designed men and women distinctly different in role and function, but intrinsically equal in essence, value, and purpose. And while God made them different in so many ways, and we looked at those differences, and by the way, if you're here and you're going, man, I wish He'd expand more on these things He's talking about, we did. I'm just giving you the condensed version, and these messages are online. I would encourage you, go back and review them or listen to them. But we took the time. We took the role of men in a separate message, and we took the role of women in a separate message, and we talked about this. But the idea was that the two together, while made different, distinctly different, are co-equal. And the reality is that individually, we talked about this, men and women image God, are the Imago Dei. Kind of, we gave this illustration, as weak as it is, kind of like a black and white television versus a colored television. Men and women by themselves, you can see the image of God. They reflect the image of God, kind of in a black and white way. When you bring them together, their weaknesses and their strengths fit in such a way that now we see the Imago Dei like a color television. The image is still there, but now it's a little more vibrant. It's a little more in depth. For some of you younger people in here that don't have any clue what a black and white television looks like, it may be the difference between just a plain television and an HD television, right? We can plainly see it, but when you get HD, man, it just brings it all vivid and close, and you can see every pore in their face and every pimple on their forehead, right? Just even more detail than you necessarily wanted to know. But that's kind of the idea when it comes to men and women. God has given them distinct roles and distinct function, but in their essence and their value and their purpose, they're equal. And when they function the way that God intended them to, it's a beautiful thing. But when we try in any way to swap that or to blur that, then it gets messed up. And that's where we're at in our society in so many ways. And then we moved from there, number 4, and we talked about love. That love is the heart of Imago Dei. Love is the heart of the image of God because love is at the core of who God is, right? 1 John, God is what? Love. And so the heart of Imago Dei is love. When we look at the person who was most clearly imaged God, it was Jesus Christ, right? And we looked at Jesus' ministry a little bit closer, and we discovered that Jesus' primary characteristic and function in His ministry was love. And we get a picture there that this perfect image bearer demonstrated this heart of Imago Dei, which is love. We took some time to talk about the reality of what love is and what love isn't, because again, it's one of those things, because it's so vitally important, the enemy does such a good job distorting the definition of what love is. And so most of us, even in the church, we walk around with a distorted view and an idea of what love is, because the world tells us that love is this accidental, uncontrollable, overwhelming feeling that's triggered by my attraction to somebody. I can't really help myself. We say things like, well, they fell in love. It sounds like an accident, right? Somebody says, well, you just can't help who you love. And we pulled some of those things apart and said, even in our terminology, it demonstrates we have twisted and deformed the beauty of love in our society today. And we as Christians, many of us have bought into this. And we said that if we go to the heart of God and we look at His Word, because He gives us the definition of love, then what we discover is that love is this willful and active desire for God's best for the object loved. It's willful. It's I purpose to place my love toward this individual. It's active. It's not passive. It's not something that happens to me. It's something I purpose to do. I will love this individual actively. Why? Because I want God's best for them. See, that's hugely different, because what that means is, in order for me to love in this way, I need to know what God's best is. And if I walk around blinded to what God's best is for people, I can't really love them like I should, because I don't know what God's best is. But see, here's the deal. God has given us in His Word what His best is. So I don't have to walk around blinded to the idea of what best is. I can love people based on the knowledge I have of His best. And we do this all the time for our children. We don't even think about it. We know what's best for them is that they eat certain things they don't want to eat. Amen? Yes, thank you very much. We know that it's best for them not to play in some areas that they want to play, like the street, right? And so when we stop them from doing those things, when we tell them no, when we put boundaries and barriers on them, we do it not to kill their fun, but to keep them alive. Because we know better than they do what life is really all about. And that's how God deals with us, in the way that He loves us, and He wants us to love others in that same way. But if we buy into a world's mentality of love, that this, you can't help, it's accidental, it's uncontrollable, it's overwhelming, it's triggered by attraction, all those things, then we're going to love in a crass, lustful kind of way that doesn't look for the best of the other person. It looks for my own self-preservation. Then I won't confront people on something where it could hurt them or could cause them harm, because I'm more concerned about my comfort level and about how they might view me. See? Now, take that into what we just talked about with our children. Your child is playing in a busy street and someone sees it and goes, "Wait, hey, your kid's play. Shouldn't you go tell them?" "Well, I'm afraid if I tell them not to play in the street, they won't love me anymore. I'm afraid if I tell them that they shouldn't stick their hand on the hot stove, that it might sever our relationship. And I'm not willing to take that risk because it might really hurt me." You see how ridiculous that is? And yet we do the same thing. The same thing. When we deal with other people and we use a world's sense of love. Well, I can't really confront them on this issue. I know it's not good for them. I know it's not God's best for them, but it's uncomfortable, and I'm not really sure. I don't want to break our relationship. I'm just not really comfortable with that. What is that? That's about me. It's about my comfort. It's about how I feel. It's not a love for them. It's masked as a love for them. But it really has to do with my own selfishness. And see, that's what happens when we buy into a world's definition of love. And listen, we talked about this when we talked about truth, that the world will always is willing to give us definitions. That's not the problem. We've got to be able to say, no, wait a minute. What does God have to say about this? Amen? Amen. So, and I told you this was going to be very hard for me not to park too long on any one of these points. But we're moving on. Here's number 5. Sexuality reflects the Imago Dei. We've seen that as bearers of the Imago Dei, we are to reflect and represent God in the way He designed us sexually, right? And we spent a whole sermon on this, talking about the reality that God made the sexes and He made sex. He has a plan for sex, and the plan is rooted in the very way that He designed men and women from the very beginning. God, remember, created man from the dust of the ground. He formed man. And we spent some time talking about, okay, God looks at this, He looks at man, He sees that all the other creation that He made, all the other animals that He made, has a mate that is comparable to them except man. And God says it's not good for the man to be alone. And so He creates woman. And we stopped there and we talked for a little bit. Okay, I can see why God would create a mate, a partner for Adam. But why did he do it the way he did it? Why didn't he just do it the same way he did with Adam, where he went to the ground and just forms a woman and breathes into her nostrils the breath of life? But that's not what he does. If you go to chapter 2, he makes Adam fall asleep and he performs the first surgery. He pulls out of Adam's side a rib, and from that rib he forms Eve. And we go, wow, that's kind of crazy. And most of the time we just look at that and go, that's interesting. We keep moving on. But there's purpose for why that's there and why God did it that way. And the purpose is because there's connection. God wanted the man and the woman to know right from the very first two people that you are connected in an intimate and in a very real way. And God created within men and women a desire to be connected. And this is huge, folks, because in the world that we live in today, there's so much confusion on this. His design for men and women is this intimate connection, real, in a real sense and also in a symbolic sense. And I want to go back and just read what Adam says when God brings Eve to him. And he knows what took place, obviously, but by the way he makes his statement here. But listen to what he says. Adam's woke up from this surgery. You know, who knows? He might have even had a little mark on the side. Wow. And he looks up, and it says in the passage that God brings Eve to him. Again, it's intentional wording. Eve was to be a gift from God to Adam. That's the whole point here. And Adam says this, at last. Now, why does he say that? Because he's been alone. We don't know how long, but he's been alone. This woman, whoa, at last. This one is bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. She'll be called woman because she was taken out of man. You see the connection? Adam recognizes this right away. Wow, this is so cool. She came out of me. And then we get the commentary in the next verse. This explains why a man leaves his father and mother and is joined, connected to his wife, and the two become one. Folks, you cannot miss the beauty of sexual unity here. And it's a man and a woman, and God built them biologically to connect. And we won't go into detail on that because I think you understand what I'm talking about. Sexuality is not something we decide. Sexuality isn't an identity that we choose. It's given to us at birth. It is biological. It is not emotional, and it's not social. It is not fluid. It is static. And any deviation from God's plan for sex and sexuality is sin, plain and simple. Folks, we live in such a confusing world because we've taken the simple and the plain and we've complicated it. I wasn't going to take time to do this, but I'm going to, real quick. Just this morning, here's the headline, NBC News. Trans dads tell doctors you can be a man and have a baby. Well, of course, that headline caught my attention. You can be a man and have a baby. Now, I'm going to try to explain this to you, but it's super confusing. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but I'm going to throw it out at you. And if you're confused, that's exactly what you should be. A trans man, when we use the word trans man, is a biological woman who identifies as a man. Got that? So a trans woman is a biological man who identifies as a woman. When a trans man and a trans woman get together, the one who is a biological woman acts like the man, and the one who is a biological man, see, I'm already confused, acts like a woman. Well, what happens when the trans couple wants to have a baby? Well, the trans man, who's really a woman, decides, I want to get pregnant by the trans woman who's really a man. And so they go to the doctor and say, take me off the testosterone supplements you've been giving me because I'm a trans man, but I'm really a woman, and so I want to get pregnant by this trans woman who's really a man. Are you getting the confusion of this whole thing? It's like we've come together and we've taken on opposite roles in this relationship, and now we want to have a baby, and we can only do that God's way, and so we want to go back to who we were so that we can have a baby and then go back to what we want to be. Is that confusing? It's absolute confusion. And Scripture says that God is not the author of confusion. Confusion comes from the enemy. The enemy wants nothing better than to confuse and mess with our identities and to mess with our sexuality, because it's the very core of society. It's how we reproduce. It's how we make other image of gods, Imago Deis. And so that's why this is such a huge issue, folks. And when we look at it, we shouldn't go, well, it's all, everybody's accepting it. No, we cannot accept confusion. It is destructive to everyone. Wasn't going to go there. Number 6, the Imago Dei makes all human life sacred. We've seen that because humans are the Imago Dei, all life is sacred and valuable. The taking of the smallest life, the frailest human life, or the oldest life is wrong, because it ultimately is a disregard for the Imago Dei. I read just this week that one person is saying that we are on the brink of another civil war. Not a civil war prayerfully, with real guns and bullets, but a civil war over a similar issue than our first civil war. Our first civil war was over slavery. This civil war is going to be over abortion. And if you've been following the news at all the last couple of weeks, you see that all these different states are purposely passing these bills that they can't even actually put into law because of the federal Roe v. Wade law, but they're doing it purposely so that it'll go to the Supreme Court and another decision will have to be made. And folks, it's just dividing our country right down the center, almost, literally, if you look at the polls. This is not an issue of a woman's right versus a baby's right. This is an Imago Dei issue, period. And you have to understand that. That's why this series is so vital for you to understand. That's why this is a trigger to remind you when you see this craziness going on. We're Imago Dei. Oh yeah, that's what this is all about. We are made in the image of God. We are precious. We are valuable. This is not disposable life. Number 7, the Imago Dei transcends color, culture, and ethnicity. We've seen that the Imago Dei is not limited to a certain ethnic culture or skin tone. There's only one race, the human race. And God, in His creativity and His artistry, the master designer, has beautifully communicated the complexities and diversities of Himself in the cultures and in the ethnicities. I was thinking about this morning. Literally, I was praying, and the window was open, and the breeze was blowing, and there was a tree right in front of me. And it just caught my attention. It was a mango tree. And, those mango leaves are kind of long and pointed, and they were just kind of just rustling a little bit. And I thought to myself, it's another sign of God's creativity. Because not every leaf is the same. Think about it. What if God had made every tree the same height, the same diameter, with the same kind of leaf on it? But he didn't. He created all these different kinds of trees. Some grow big, some grow bushy, some grow skinny, some grow fat, some have wide leaves, some have skinny leaves. And I was thinking about it as I was looking, and I was like, man, this is a picture of God's artistry and his creativity. And it's also a reminder that that's how he's made people. We're not all the same color. We don't have even the same tastes. We have different cultures. And it's a reflection of the beauty of the God who made us. Number 8, embracing the truth of Imago Dei brings life and flourishing. We've emphasized over and over again in our series that the reality is that when Imago Dei is embraced, it brings life and flourishing, but when Imago Dei is abandoned, it brings destruction and the aroma of death. And that's what we see happening around us in our world. The important truth of the matter is that there has never been a human being who was created who was not Imago Dei. Everyone is. Every single person you encounter on any given day, whether it's the busy airport where there's hundreds of people passing you by, all Imago Dei. It could be the cashier at the register who's exchanging money with you, they're Imago Dei. It may be the police officer who's writing you a citation, he's Imago Dei. Every human being ever created, Imago Dei. And when that is understood and we zero in on that, it brings life and flourishing. We've got to know this and we've got to contemplate it because it literally changes everything, and that's what we've been saying in this. And it goes back to that passage I opened with this morning in Ephesians chapter 4. With the Lord's authority, Paul said, I say this, live no longer as the world, as the Gentiles, for they're hopelessly confused. Their minds are full of darkness. They wander far from God, who gives them hope, because they have closed their minds and their hearts are hardened against him. What is going on? They are not embracing the Imago Dei, and so it's all about destruction and the aroma of death. And Paul says, that is not who you are, and so don't live that way. So very quickly, why understanding the Imago Dei matters? Why? Why did we take all these weeks, talk about all these things? By the way, we didn't touch on everything. But why did we take all this time? Well, number one, understanding of the Imago Dei shapes your worldview. Worldview is not a term that we hear used a whole lot, but it's extremely important. A person's worldview is how they view the world. It's a person's belief in what the story of reality is. It's their understanding of how it all fits together. Worldview is another way of saying a belief system. What's your belief system? A worldview or the story of reality or your belief system, however you want to label it, it deals with the issues of where we come from, why we were put here. How can we know right from wrong? Why does it seem like the world isn't right? And if it isn't right, how can the world get right? And where is it all heading? Those are all questions and statements that deal with worldview. And Imago Dei, understanding that God is creator and that we are made, people are made in the image of God, is the foundation for your worldview, for what you believe is reality. And so understanding Imago Dei shapes your worldview. Here's number 2, understanding Imago Dei shapes your people view. Because people have been imprinted with the image of God, we have value. We're loved by God in a special way. Every person bears Imago Dei and matters to God. So, every person needs to matter to us. See how that works? Because people are made in the image of God, they have value, and that makes them worth loving. So what makes a person worth loving? The way they look, the way they act, where they're from, the color of their skin? No. What makes a person worth loving is that they are people made in the image of God. And because they're worth loving, and because they are Imago Dei, not only are they worth loving, they're also worth protecting. See how this covers so many different things, just these simple ideas. When people in a culture stop seeing the value of humanity based on what they possess, the Imago Dei, this is who I am, then they'll only see people as valuable if they can contribute, how they contribute to society. When a person is valuable for what they do, then when they can't contribute anymore, they're devalued. And when people are devalued, they become disposable. See how that works? Number 3, understanding Imago Dei shapes our worldview, it shapes our people view, and ultimately it shapes our eternal view. We said that the problem with Imago Dei is that we've all been tarnished by sin. The mirror, because of sin, has gone from reflecting Him, it's been misangled, it's been soiled, it's been dirtied because of sin, because we've broken the boundaries, the barriers, the distinctives, the commands of the Heavenly Father who says, I made you and I know what's best for you. See, when Satan came along in the garden and he tempted Eve, he had to first begin to get Eve to believe that God's intention for her was not best. God does not have best for you, Eve. In fact, God is keeping best from you. And if you eat from this tree, you will become God. You will be able to know what's best for your life, Eve, if you just understand that God's boundaries, His commands for you are not for your best. So follow Eve, your heart. And what happened is, from that point on, all of us have experienced the consequences of Adam and Eve's decision. Sin altered the direction of our reflection. It altered the clarity of our reflection. And it says in Romans 3:23, everyone has sinned and falls short of the glory of God. What that means is we cannot reflect God the way we were intended to. We cannot image God the way we were intended to. So how does that get resolved? We can't take care of our own repositioning. We can't clean up our own mirror. It took God coming to us. And see, because we're made in His image, He loves us in a unique and a wonderful way. And so when we couldn't get to God, God came to us. I learned something a long time ago working with kids, that when you work with small children, if you want to get their attention, if you want to show them that you care, you got to get down on their level. And you can do that one of two ways. One way is that you crouch down, you bend down, you get down, and you meet them right at their level. That's exactly what God did to us. We couldn't get up to His. So God came down to our level to meet us where we were at. Not to show us how to live, but to clean us up, to be the sacrifice for our sin so the mirror could get fixed because it was broken, so we could image God the way we're supposed to. Now, the second way that you can get a child on your level is not only to crouch down and get low to them, but you can pick them up and pull them up to yourself. And see, when we place our faith and trust in the belief that God came in the person of Jesus Christ to meet us at our level, to die for our sin, and we accept that, then one day God will pull us up to His level. Amen? Folks, the Imago Dei is so vitally important for us to understand. We're going to finish this morning with a story. Everybody loves stories, right? This story is it's an allegory about the Imago Dei. Watch and listen This is to help you to kind of maybe take all of the different things that we've talked about and put it together in this beautiful story of what God has done for you and me. Let's watch it.